Okay, so this week we're going to look at audio recording. Before we move on to kind of recording some different instruments and vocals, I just want to cover some questions from the previous weeks that people have come in. Now, one of the questions was when I'm playing my keyboard, it doesn't play and I can't get it to work. What possible solutions do I have for this? Now, one thing I kind of neglected to say is actually with the Ableton push in Ableton, it kind of just works. Everything kind of just sets itself up and it just kind of works. But with other interfaces, you do have to go in and set them up a little bit. The most common reason something doesn't work is because it's not record activated. So if we look at this keyboard channel, if I press my keyboard now, you see there's no sounds coming up. And this button here is the record activate button. So when I press this, hopefully we should hear the keyboard. And there we are. So just by activating it to record, that's one thing. The other reason it could be is this button here, which kind of acts as a channel activation. So with it turned off, it's almost like a mute button. So you've got your solo button here, but with this button off, also you shouldn't be able to hear anything again, okay? Because obviously it's muted, whereas the solo button with the record and activate, if you were playing all of these channels as well, you shouldn't hear this because we're in solo mode. Take it out of solo mode, it comes on. Deactivate the channel. So let me just turn this off. In most programs, you have two buttons, a mute and a solo. In this, they're kind of just labelled 1, 2, 3 and so on. But that is basically your mute button there, and this is your solo button. So mute just turns it off, solo just makes sure it isolates it, and then finally this record activate for most instruments will just kind of make it so that you can hear that channel. Now, another thing that you may have, if you're on a Windows machine, you want to come to the options and then preferences. On a Mac, go live and then preferences. Another thing, you may have to set up the MIDI control. So with the push, it kind of instantly does this as a control surface, and then you can kind of work out what you want. With other ones, if it's in this list here, you can just select it from the list and you're away basically, and then just select the same inputs and outputs from here. And that just depends on your unit. Mostly you'll find it in this list and you're away. If you don't find it, you might just have to have a little play. It's like my keyboard, you'll notice, isn't in this list. It's here, so as an input it says the EMU Xboard 49, but it's actually not in this list. If I look down, you won't find that. But then I turn it on and away I go. But mostly the only problem I'm going to have is if it's not activated. Okay, so that's one thing. Now let's set up an audio channel. So right click audio, and we have our audio channel, and I just need to explain a few things about how this works. Now, for recording audio, you pretty much want a specialized unit to record either vocals, guitars, or whatever you want to record. Now the unit that I'm using is fairly inexpensive. It's about £100, £150. It's not expensive. It's an M Audio Profire 610. Now it's a Firewire unit, and I actually, if you're investing for the first time, I wouldn't recommend you getting a Firewire unit, purely because Apple have discontinued making Firewire 400s and Firewire 800s, and everything seems to be going down a route of USB now. So I would definitely recommend you get a USB 3 audio interface now. And there's a lot of good ones. When I bought this one, it was a few years back, and USB was absolutely naff. It would fall out of sync. There would be latency issues that were unsolvable. There'd be all kinds of little issues. It just made it, unsuitable for recording, and Firewire was definitely the way to go. Now, with the innovation of USB 3, it's really come on, and it actually works just as well as Firewire, and in a lot of cases even better. The one, if you're on a really tight budget, the one that I'm favouring at the moment for versatility, depending on your needs, is the iRig Pro. The iRig Pro is quite interesting because if you've got an Apple device or even an Android device, I think it is just Apple devices. You can plug it into your iPads or your iPhones or your iPods, whatever, and you can play with various software. And it connects to MIDI, it connects to a jack input, it connects to headphones, and it also connects to XLR. So you can literally put everything through this. And I think if you're lucky, you'll find a deal for about £39. In most instances, it's about £40 to £50, but really inexpensive. It's such a small little unit as well. Worth having a look at, unless you need multiple inputs and outputs, of course. If you want to do some monitoring, it's probably not going to be suitable. Or if you want to record drums, it's definitely not going to be suitable. But if you're just recording one instrument at a time and you're monitoring through your computer, or you have a different system for monitoring, it's absolutely perfect, actually. Okay, so that's been said about that. How you set up your audio interface. Once again, come to options if you're on a Mac and go down to preferences. Sorry, on a PC, options, preferences. On a Mac, come to live preferences. And now under the audio tab, you just want to select it from here. Now, I'm continuing to use my built-in inputs at the moment. I will switch them over, but I'm going to just use my inputs through the FireWire at the moment. So here it is. And once you've installed the drivers, it will come up in this list. You can select it and you're away. That's literally all you have to do. And that's under the audio tab, okay? Audio inputs and outputs, and I can change both of these over. At the moment, because of the way I've set my system up, I have to use these outputs, but I will change that over in a sec. You may have to do some optional configuration, and I've just set it to mono and stereo, and that's absolutely fine. That'll work perfectly for me. Yeah, and like I said, that's pretty much it. The only thing you might struggle with, depending on your device, is drivers. Now, I had to install the drivers from this, and all I did was a quick Google search for M-Audio ProFire 610 drivers, and I think it was this one I clicked on. And then it says, okay, walk through. Now, because it's quite an old unit, I had to go to the legacy mode, and then from the legacy mode, scroll all the way down until I find it. And a lot, depending on your audio system, depending on who it's by, it'll be a similar process, I should think. And there's my unit there, and then it says the actual unit. So I'm on a Mac 10.10.2 or something like that. The highest it goes to is 10.10.1, so that one will be absolutely fine. Show results, and then scroll down, driver updates, and download them from there, and then just install them. You'll probably have to restart your computer, but that's literally it after that. Okay, that's all about the install. Now we're going to set up to record a bass guitar, or an electric guitar, or vocals. Okay, now we're going to get back into this section. So these are all our clips. Now below this point here is our mixing channel. So I've talked about the mute button, the solo button, and the record activation button. This dial here is panning, so we can actually pan it to the hard left, or we can pan it to hard right. And this button here controls the output signal, okay? So once it's been recorded, you can reduce it. From here, you might also need to configure how you record it. Now you can come over to the I/O section, and it brings up this extra panel. We've got a few extra things here that we can turn off. So if you want to turn off the solo and the record and the mute buttons, you can. If you want to add some delay, you can. And then if you want to add this is quite an interesting one, but if you're a bit of a DJ and you have deck A and deck B, you've got this nice little slider, so you can assign things to deck A and assign things to deck B, and then use this slider to switch between. That's really interesting. We'll do a little bit on that. So we'll get rid of all them, but this is literally where everything is. So the I/O section is your inputs. Now you can see, if I play my bass guitar now, you can see it's coming in, and this signal here tells me that it's coming in and that everything's good. However, I can't hear it. So the first thing you might think to yourself is, what's going on here? Why is it showing up there, but why can't I hear it? And it's literally the way you monitor. Normally you want it as off, because when you're listening back to things, you don't want to hear your microphone in the background playing havoc. Okay, so generally this is set to off. If you set it to in, it will always be on. So if I do that now, and you can hear the bass guitar, and no matter what I do, that will just always be on. Okay, so that's could be useful, but the one that I find most useful is this auto. You turn to auto, and when you play your electric bass, here it's my bass, you can still see I'm on auto, but there's no signal there, and that's because we need to record enable. So there it is there. Once we record enable, and you'll see the signal comes through. Now how this is routed, it's saying we've got an external input, so it's pulling that from the settings in the audio tab in our preferences. Okay, so it's pulling it from there, and that's what it's telling us everything's coming in from. So our external input. Then it's telling me how much signal I've got. Then it's saying how do I want to monitor it, and then where do I want it to go from there. Okay, so the next thing you want to do is just make sure your signal level is good. Now on this particular unit, I have a gain dial. What I'm aiming for with this gain dial is probably as close to -6 dB as possible. I really don't want it at 0 dB. I really don't want it any higher than that, because that's when you start getting distortion. So I'm going to turn my gain up, and you can hear there's the noise to signal ratio. And did you hear that buzzing? Basically saying actually that's way too much noise for this signal. So turn it down until that noise signal is completely gone. Otherwise it's going to interfere with your signal. And we're still there. And now you can hear there's no signal. I've got that on my gain pot that's just over halfway, ever so slightly over halfway. So let me see what my signal's like on my guitar. Okay, so if I play loud, I can get to -12, and that signal is absolutely adequate. I could probably push a bit more signal out on the actual dials of the guitar itself, but we'll get there. And the most important mission is we don't get past 0 dB. Now, I think I've said all I need to say about that and how to set up your interfaces and get yourself set up. So in the next lesson, we're going to look at recording guitar. So join me in the next lesson.